The sky above Sicily cracked like glass. A thunderous groan rolled across the land, deeper than sound, older than time. Villagers on the slopes of Mount Etna dropped their tools and froze, eyes snapping upward as the earth trembled beneath their feet. Birds spiraled into a panicked flight, and goats bleated wildly, fleeing their pens. Then came the silence, a silence so sudden, so complete, it felt like the world had stopped breathing. And then Etna screamed. A column of fire and black smoke erupted from her summit, a glowing lance that split the heavens. Lava surged from newly torn fissures like blood from a fresh wound, painting the mountainside in molten red. Lightning cracked inside the ash cloud, turning the sky into a strobe of divine fury. But beneath the roar of fire and stone, something else moved. Miles beneath the volcano's crust, past the roots of mountains and the memories of men, a pair of golden eyes blinked open in the dark. The dragon remembered flame. High above the chaos, from the ancient ruins of a long-forgotten temple near Etna's peak, a solitary figure stood against the storm of ash. Her crimson cloak flapped wildly in the rising wind, and her eyes, the pale gray of morning frost, watched the fury unfold with no fear, only purpose. Soraya of the Fifth Veil, seer of the Ashen Order, had seen this day in the flame years ago. She had prayed it would never come. Behind her, the temple walls crumbled from the tremors. Sigils carved into obsidian stone, protections forged in the dawn of man, cracked and flickered, their old magic unraveling. One by one, the chains of fire that had kept it buried pulsed with orange light, then snapped like threads of glass. Soraya dropped to her knees, palms pressed to the trembling earth. Her voice was a whisper drowned in the storm. He wakes. The lava at the mountain's heart churned. It parted, not with the flow of liquid stone, but as if something massive was pushing up through it. Scales the color of midnight, veined with veins of magma, broke the surface like the rising back of some great leviathan. A horned crown emerged next, twin arcs of obsidian jutting from a monstrous head. Then the wings, skeletal and vast, webbed with lava-lit membranes, unfolded in the smoke like sails catching the wind of hell. With a sound like a world exhaling, the dragon rose from the depths. He was older than the mountain, older than the gods who chained him here. His name had been spoken only in whispers by those who remembered the old stories. Azkarth the Ember Tyrant, the first flame. His eyes scanned the world that had forgotten him, and he roared. The eruption was no longer just volcanic. It was rebirth. It was declaration. The age of fire had come again. And far below, in the shadow of the mountain, a boy named Luca, who would one day stand face to face with Azkarth, stared at the falling ash with wide eyes, not knowing the blood in his veins carried a secret that could end the dragon, or awaken something even worse. He just knew the world was ending, and for the first time in 1,000 years, it truly was. Long before men tamed steel or named the stars, the earth belonged to flame. The skies were thick with ash and the oceans boiled at their edges. Towering beasts walked the land, but none more feared, none more terrible than Azkarth the Ember Tyrant, firstborn of the Flame Eater, devourer of kingdoms, breaker of the sunlit age. He came on wings that blotted out the dawn, trailing smoke like banners of war. His breath was not fire, but unmaking, a heat that melted not only stone but memory. Cities did not burn when Azkarth passed over them. They ceased to have ever been. For a time, he reigned unchecked. Gods hid behind their own creations, and mortals wept in temples to deities who dared not answer. But fire breeds resistance, and in the heart of humanity, resistance grew teeth. From the shattered remnants of 12 fallen kingdoms rose a pact. Not kings, not armies, but the last mages of the elder blood, those whose veins still ran with silver flame, and whose voices could bend the world if they spoke in the true tongue. They called themselves the Ashen Covenant, and they met not in halls or palaces, but beneath the world, in a chamber carved into the roots of Etna, where fire and earth whispered the oldest truths. 12 stood against 1. It was not enough. The battle raged for 7 days and nights, shaking the bones of the world. The sky cracked open, stars bled. Azkarth's wrath was unimaginable. He slaughtered 3 of the Covenant before they even spoke a word. Another 4 were burned from the inside out. Their bodies, walking husks, turned to ash before they hit the ground. But the last 5, broken, desperate, defiant, did not flee. They cast a veil of binding, a spell that would not kill the dragon, for nothing of this world could, but imprison him. It was a sacrifice spell, an act that would bind their souls to the volcano itself, make them its eternal wardens, neither living nor dead. Each became a pillar of flame, buried within the magma, feeding the prison with their own essence. Azkarth fought. Gods, how he fought. But even a god must sleep. With a scream that tore across the continents, Azkarth fell, pulled down into the molten core of Etna. The lava closed over him like a lid over a furnace, and the mountain, now crowned with sorrow and death, grew still. The Ashen Covenant became myth, their descendants scattered, their bloodlines diluted and forgotten, until only a few scattered whispers and faded glyphs remained to hint at what had been done. The prison held, as all prisons do, until time grew bored of its duty. But spells age, and so do secrets. And now, over 3,000 years later, in a world that no longer remembered what fire could be, the spell had cracked, the veil had thinned, and Azkarth, dreaming in magma and wrath, had begun to remember his name. He would rise again, and this time, there would be no covenant left to stop him. It was first dismissed as a weather anomaly. Satellite images showed a plume of ash stretching over 200 kilometers from the summit of Mount Etna. Seismologists warned of another major eruption, the worst in decades. Air traffic over southern Europe was grounded within the hour. Emergency alerts flashed across Italian news channels. Evacuate. But then came the roar, not the sound of earth shifting or gas exploding from fissures. This was alive. A bellow so vast it shook the glass from high-rises in Palermo and echoed across the Mediterranean like a war horn from a forgotten age. And then the world saw him. Azkarth rose through the ash like a titan from myth, wings outstretched wider than football fields, his body glowing with volcanic fury. Cameras captured his silhouette against the sun, an impossible, bone-winged beast whose roar broke the laws of decibel, whose molten breath turned mountaintop stone into glass. The video went viral in under 5 minutes. Governments didn't have protocols for ancient fire gods, but they had jets. By noon, Italy had deployed Eurofighter Typhoons out of Trapani, Birgi Air Base. A joint NATO response followed. American F-22 Raptors launched from Aviano, joined by drones armed with high-yield bunker busters. They never made it to the target. Azkarth, mid-glide over the Tyrrhenian Sea, sensed them long before radar did. His eyes glowed with a predator's patience, and when the fighters closed in, he turned. A single beat of his wings scattered air pressure with hurricane force, flipping one of the drones into a freefall. Then came the fire, not just heat, but a column of searing, otherworldly flame that pierced the sky and melted 2 jets mid-flight. The sea boiled where the breath struck it. Pilots screamed over calms before static swallowed them. In Rome, the Prime Minister's hands trembled as he watched the footage. In Washington, the Pentagon went dark. In Beijing, generals spoke of ancient omens. In Jerusalem, rabbis opened books older than nations. And in Vatican City, a priest dropped to his knees and began weeping in Latin. The world had long laughed at the notion of dragons. Now it bled trying to stop one. In the forests near Catania, the survivors ran. Luca Moretti was among them, caked in ash, sweat, and disbelief. He didn't know why the dragon's scream had echoed inside his bones like a calling, only that it had. Buildings lay in rubble. The roads melted. Sirens wailed through smoke. Overhead, the sky turned the color of bruised blood. He saw a military convoy reduced to slag. He saw a bus of evacuees, people he knew, frozen in place, eyes wide, skin blistered black, as if fire had passed through without touching the air between. And in the haze of it all, he saw her, a woman in red, crimson cloak, pale gray eyes, unmoving even as the world shook. She looked directly at him through the ash and fire, not with terror, but with certainty, as if he was the one she had come for. She mouthed a word he couldn't hear. Then the wind came again, and with it, the shadow of Azkarth passing overhead. The world was falling, and Luca realized something no one else had said yet, something no leader, no general, no survivor had dared to put into words. We are not the top of the food chain. We never were. The dragon did not fly without purpose. Though the world believed Azkarth was a beast of chaos, a wrathful force lashing blindly, the Ember Tyrant's mind was old, sharp as volcanic glass, and burning with memory. He had not forgotten. He knew exactly what he was doing, and exactly where he was going. Naples, a city draped in history and marble, fell before noon. Azkarth descended not from above, but from within, rising out of the bay like a god from the deep, trailing steam and blood-boiled fish. He landed on Castel dell'Ovo and crushed it beneath him like sand beneath a heel. His tail lashed through the ancient district, turning buildings into collapsing skeletons of stone and fire. The harbor exploded when his breath ignited the fuel tanks of retreating naval vessels, and flames rolled over the water like liquid napalm. Thousands died before the world could even name the attack. But Azkarth was already rising again, molten wings beating, rising toward the east. In Delphi, Greece, the ruins of the oracle's temple cracked and shook as the sky darkened. Tourists fled screaming as the winds howled with sulfur. Azkarth didn't land. He circled, and he watched. From above, he opened his jaws and let fall not flame, but something older, embers that whispered, sparks of thought and fire, drifting like snowflakes, glowing with ancient language. The stones beneath stirred, not breaking, but answering, like memory awakening. The air itself seemed to chant in rhythm with some forgotten chorus. Then Azkarth turned satisfied. Delphi would burn later. First, it had to remember. The Vatican came next. Military analysts could not understand why the dragon bypassed larger cities, but Soraya of the Fifth Veil understood. He was striking at memory, at places that knew. Ancient places, places heavy with story and stone and belief. Not cities, symbols. He meant to unmake the anchors of the world. As he passed over Rome, Azkarth did not breathe fire. He screamed. The cry shattered stained glass in the basilica and cracked the dome of St. Peter's like an egg. The bronze statues wept molten tears. Priests collapsed to their knees, clutching rosaries that turned red-hot in their palms. The Pope himself reportedly saw a shape within the fire, a crowned serpent, haloed in thorns. Security forces tried to intercept. Missiles fired from armored rooftops. They didn't even reach him. He twisted in midair and flared his wings, sending shockwaves that threw helicopters from the sky like toys. The Swiss guard fired everything they had, and watched it melt before reaching him. When Azkarth finally spoke, it wasn't with his mouth, but with his flame. Language written in the sky with burning sigils that no living tongue could translate. Except one. Far below, in a ruined street in Catania, Luca Moretti looked up and read it. Not with his mind, with something deeper. A reflex, like breathing. He didn't understand why the letters made sense, why the fire whispered directly into his marrow. But he understood the meaning. The false fire is ended. The true flame returns. Then the sigils vanished. That night, Azkarth rested atop the shattered remnants of Mount Etna, his wings draped around him like a cloak. He gazed out over a continent bathed in fear. Not just to burn, that was too simple. Azkarth had returned to reclaim, to rebuild the world in fire and memory and truth. And he would not stop until every lie, every god, every tower, every story that dared to forget his name, was ash. Next, he would cross the sea, and the world would learn what happened when a god did not want worship, only submission. The ash was falling like snow. Catania burned in the distance, its skyline reduced to flickers of flame and broken silhouettes. Sirens had long since gone silent. Luca Moretti crouched in the ruins of what had once been a bakery, his lungs raw from smoke, his hands trembling. He had seen people burned alive, the sky split in half, and something worse than fire written across the heavens, and somehow he understood it. He didn't know how long he sat there, whispering the glowing words over and over. Then she came. No sound, no footfalls, just a presence, like the air had forgotten how to carry weight. Luca turned too late. The woman in red was behind him. Her cloak shimmered in the dim light, the edges glowing faintly, like embers dying against silk. "You're awake," she said, voice cold and careful, like a knife being drawn. Luca tried to speak. Instead, he coughed. "Don't move. The shock is setting in. I gave you more time than most. You should thank me." He opened his mouth to protest, but her hand flashed forward. 2 fingers pressed to his forehead, and the world collapsed. He awoke in firelight, but not flame, glyphlight. Dozens of burning sigils hovered in the air, rotating slowly, casting shadows against ancient volcanic stone. They were underground, a cavern, alive with magic, carved by hand and lava and time. He sat on a stone dais, and the woman stood before him, hood pulled back now. Her features were sharp, ageless, eyes the color of old ice, hair like woven smoke. Her face was both beautiful and terrible, like a statue that remembered pain. "I am Soraya of the Fifth Veil," she said, "last of the Ashen Covenant. And you, Luca Moretti, are the final heir." Luca blinked. What are you talking about?" "You've heard his words," she said. "Not just seen them, felt them. That's the blood. You carry the ember in your veins, same as I. Only your line is older, purer, the last surviving spark of the mage who led the binding, Altharian Moretti, your ancestor." "No," Luca whispered. I'm a student. I make coffee and write essays on Roman history. Exactly," Soraya said. "You study the past because it calls to you." She walked to a glyph and passed her hand through it. The symbol flared, then shimmered into an image. 12 mages standing in a ring around a roaring pit, fire swirling between them. One stood tallest, his robes laced in gold, his face familiar. Luca gasped. "That's Altharian," Soraya said. "Your blood remembers. You've been drawn here your whole life." Luca stood, breath short. "Why me? What am I supposed to do? Fight that thing? You saw what it did to Jets. That's not a dragon, it's a god." "No," Soraya said. "It is a tyrant, and you were not born to fight it." She turned to him fully now, and her expression shifted, from cold to solemn. "You were born to bind it again." Luca stared. "That spell killed the others." "It did," she nodded. "But they were 5. You are 1. If we channel it through you now, raw and alone." She trailed off. "What? You'll burn," she said. "But you'll take him with you." Silence. The glyphs hummed. Luca sank back onto the stone. Why not just run? Let the world deal with him. Let nukes handle it. "They already tried," she said. "You saw what happened." She moved closer and knelt beside him. "Listen, Luca. The world thinks he wants to kill. He doesn't. He wants to rule. Burn away memory. Rewrite everything in flame and obedience. This isn't about death. It's about erasure. If he finishes what he started, no one will even remember there was a world before him. Only ash. And I'm supposed to stop that," he said, voice cracking. "You're not alone," Soraya whispered. "I've kept the veil alive. I can help guide the ritual. But only you have the spark strong enough to seal him." Luca looked down at his hands, shaking, blistered, human. And then he looked up and saw, reflected in the glyph light, his eyes glowing faintly red. "Then teach me," he said, "before it's too late." Soraya nodded once. "Good," she said, "because Etna was only the first key. He's heading to the second now, to Santorini." She looked up toward the ceiling of the cavern. "And we have 3 days before the god's last prison falls." The world had gone dark, not from nightfall, but from the smoke. In just 2 days, Azkarth had turned the Mediterranean into a kingdom of flame. The coasts of Albania, Crete, and southern Turkey were scorched. Mykonos had fallen, Rhodes smoldered, and now the dragon hovered above the island of Santorini, wings spread over the whitewashed domes like a storm cloud of judgment. Azkarth had not struck yet. He was waiting. He knew. Far beneath the island, inside a cavern that had once been a Minoan shrine, Luca Moretti opened his eyes, and they blazed. For 2 days, Soraya had trained him in silence and fire. She had led him through memories written into the walls of the earth, through visions etched in ancient bloodlines. Glyphs had seared themselves into his arms, glowing gold when he chanted in the true tongue. His hands no longer shook. His fear had become something sharper, something molten. He wasn't a sorcerer. He wasn't a soldier. He was a vessel, a living fuse between magic and sacrifice. And now he was ready. Breathe, Soraya said, her hand resting on his shoulder. Feel the ember. Don't resist it. Don't control it. Accept it. I feel it, Luca said, his voice distant, as if echoing in 2 worlds at once. It's alive. It is you, she said, and it's enough. Luca stood from the circle of glowing runes, his red-marked arms pulsing in rhythm with the earth. Above them, the volcano rumbled. Is this how they felt? He asked, looking to her. The covenant, before they cast the first veil. Soraya's expression tightened. No, she said. They were afraid. He nodded. I'm not. For the first time in 2 days, Soraya allowed herself a smile. Above, the people of Santorini screamed as the sky split. Azkarth descended slowly, as if savoring the moment. His eyes glowed like twin suns. His massive claws gripped the caldera's rim. Below him, the volcanic sea began to bubble, and the air shimmered with heat. He raised his wings, and then he paused. A sound echoed from below. Not a roar, not a cry, a word, spoken in the true tongue. From the heart of the caldera, a spiral of flame burst skyward, white fire, not born of destruction, but of memory, of binding, of choice. The flames twisted together, forming a bridge from the cave mouth to the sky. And Luca stepped into the light. The runes on his arms blazed. His eyes were not red now, but gold, the color of the first flame, the binding flame. His voice shook the island when he spoke again. Azkarth, you are summoned. The dragon hissed, drawing back his head. You, he growled, his voice 1,000 voices, his words made of magma and contempt. The Ember Child. You remember me, Luca said, stepping higher into the air as the flame carried him like the stairway. I remember your blood, Azkarth spat. I broke your kind. I burned them from the age of the world. And now I finish what they began. Azkarth's wings snapped wide. You think you can hold me again, Sparkborn? You are alone. No, Luca said. I carry the fire of 5. Behind him, cavern flared. Soraya stood at its edge, arms raised. Her voice joined with his. Ancient glyphs spun from her hands, and from within the stones of the caldera, 5 ghostly figures emerged, the last souls of the Ashen covenant, drawn to the air of their legacy. Azkarth reared back and shrieked, a sound that bent the air itself, and Luca rose to meet him. The final veil would be cast at dawn, and only one would survive the fire. At 5:42 a.m., the ash parted over the Aegean Sea. Dawn broke in streaks of blood-orange light through the smoke-choked sky, casting eerie shadows across the ruined beauty of Santorini. A single camera drone, launched from a battered Hellenic news vessel off the island's coast, hovered on auto-override. Its operators, a hardened journalist named Mara Eleftheria and her cameraman Tassis, hadn't planned to record the apocalypse. But now, they were broadcasting live to the world, and the world was watching. In the sky above the caldera, a god and a boy made of fire were locked in battle. Luca was no longer just a man. The glyphs spiraling over his body burned with white flame, carving ancient runes in the air with every motion. He soared on wings of conjured fire, not flapping, but streaking like a comet. His arms were thrown wide, chanting in the true tongue, the words ancient and shaking the very bones of the island. Below him, Azkarth loomed, a mountain of scale and hate and molten wrath. The Ember Tyrant's wings blotted out the sun. His tail lashed through the sea, turning waves into steam. He roared again, and the sound was an undoing. Cameras flickered, and the drone trembled in the air. But it held, and Luca rose to meet him. The battle. It wasn't a clash. It was a ritual, violent and vast. Azkarth exhaled a torrent of flame, and Luca caught it. His hand stretched wide, and the fire curved around him in a sphere of golden light, burning away before it could touch his skin. He shouted the next line of the spell, and sigils erupted in the air, forming a prison of light around the dragon. Azkarth broke through one, too, but the third held. Luca pressed forward, floating eye to eye with the beast. "I'm not binding your body," he said aloud. "I'm binding your name." Azkarth snarled. "You have no right." "I have your legacy in my blood," Luca shouted. "I am your right." The 5 glowing spirits of the Ashen Covenant surged from below, joining hands in a blazing ring around the dragon. Soraya stood at the mouth of the cavern, her own body glowing, lips moving in perfect unison with Luca's. And the world watched. On TV screens in New York, Shanghai, Sao Paulo, people held their breath. In bunkers beneath London and aboard warships off the Israeli coast, military officials stared, speechless. And in living rooms and phones and cafe windows across the globe, humanity watched a myth made real, and watched a boy unmake a god. The final word came like thunder. Verithni. Luca screamed, the last line of the binding veil. The light around him turned white-hot. Azkarth screamed, not in rage, but in recognition, and fire exploded outward, engulfing both of them in a searing column of flame that rocketed into the clouds. The drone feed went white. Silence. The sea was boiling. The caldera had collapsed in on itself. The ruins of Santorini smoked gently beneath the morning sun. And there, in the center of the ruined circle, one figure stood. Luca. He was burned, his robes gone, his skin cracked like porcelain over flame. The glyphs had faded. His eyes were still gold, but dimming. Slowly, he turned to the drone, hovering just feet away. He smiled. "Tell them," he rasped. "It's over." And then he collapsed. Later that day, the footage went global. Every channel, every platform. The world saw the boy with fire in his blood defeat the ancient dragon with words older than civilization. Mara's final report, delivered through tears, said it best. Luca Moretti, scholar, orphan, unknown, saved us all. He walked into the fire alone, and became the last light the world may ever see. But the world did not breathe easy. In the wake of Luca's sacrifice, the questions began to rise. If the Covenant was real, if Azkarth was real, if fire could wake after thousands of years, what else is sleeping beneath our feet? What gods? What monsters? What magic? Somewhere on an unmarked island in the North Sea, a stone blinked for the first time in 10,000 years, and deep in the earth of an African desert, something old began to laugh. The age of myth was not over. It had only just begun.